Not a matter of if, but when crisis will rock your world. I'm Roshini Rajkumar, crisis strategist, licensed attorney, and host of The Crisis Files. In each case file, we explore hot topics to keep you out of hot water. The Crisis Files hospitality and experience contributor, Jill Renslow, is back in the studio. She is Chief Business Development and Marketing Officer for Mall of America. She needs to keep her eye on multiple front lines so she doesn't end up on defense. Jill is here for the case file I call Pulled into the Storm. Jill, with negative headlines all around us, it's really interesting that some brands are getting pulled into negative spotlight, even when the narrative has nothing to do with them. Could you walk us through some best practices and how to just stay calm and not go into crisis yourself?
Well, thank you, Roshini, for having me today. And, this is a really important conversation because I feel like a lot of brands are getting caught up in conversations that they never asked to be part of. And let me tell you, at Mall of America, we've had years of experience in this space, but I feel like the social media platform and the landscape has really changed quite a bit, especially over the last couple of years with the political charge that we're seeing. And I think what's important for leaders is to really step back and make sure you have a strategy around this, is not to just let your social team just roll, but to really have that conversation internally to understand what's important, what you should lean into versus what you want to lean back on. Because sometimes being quiet is the best strategy, because you sometimes just need to let the conversations roll as organically and know that you have brand ambassadors that will step in and correct the path for you. Oftentimes the cycles will be short enough where you can just let it ride and then you drown it out with your own positive content. But it's a smart balance that you need to really have of when you lean in and when you lean back. And so I think it's important, first and foremost, for brands to have the conversation to strategize what this looks like for them so they know how they're going to navigate through these waters.
And definitely to stay authentic. It's amazing when we really think about Mall of America, the largest shopping, retail, entertainment complex in the United States, and you're not in negative headlines that much. I mean, I track it pretty well, and you're not. And I can only imagine all the things that are happening that the general public doesn't know that you either get pulled into or could get pulled into. So how do you keep your team, because you've got visitors from all over the world coming to your facility, how do you keep your team grounded in the reality and in your own narratives and staying as positive as possible?
That's an important point, because your social teams are living and breathing this content every single day. They're looking at it minute by minute. Whereas to your point, as a consumer of Mall of America, you're not necessarily looking at all the detail, or it might not be on the threads or the people that you're following. So from a brand perspective, it's much more amplified because you're seeing every comment that you're pulled into. And oftentimes, if it's not within your sphere of content, it's usually not to your core customer. And I think brands really need to remember that even if things go sideways and you might get pulled into something that's not aligned with your brand, is it really hitting the audience that's most important to you? And we have to align ourselves oftentimes on that to realize, okay, it might be getting loud out there in what we're seeing, but is it really hitting our core customer? So I think that's really important. And to make sure you're giving your team the resources and the support that they need so that they can navigate through, and really monitoring the content, because if it starts building up some steam, making sure that they have the resources and knowing how quickly they should jump in or not jump in and what that conversation looks like, but really training your team and trusting in them.
I was going to say, you have to trust them, right? Because
Absolutely.
You cannot possibly be, as the leader and the boss, in all places at all times, and when any given narrative or headline erupts.
Absolutely. And you want your team to always lean into facts and being accurate. So if they do insert themselves in having part of a conversation, a lot of times they're direct messaging some of the people that are starting the content that might not be accurate. And so leaning into that and making sure you're true to the values of your brand and making sure that you keep that on course, that you don't shift, because I think a lot of times people feel like they have to react quickly, and especially if there's conversations happening in the community and especially across the nation. And if it's something that a brand feels very passionate about, take a pause, take a breath. You don't need to jump in right away, making sure that you give yourself that time to really evaluate what makes the most sense for us, because you want to sometimes be a footnote and not a headline. And if you jump in too quickly, you might be caught in a headline in a spiral that's a lot harder to control.
I really love that visual, because often when we're talking marketing and promotion and brand, we want to be the headline, we want to be in the spotlight, but it's okay to be the footnote or not even part of the story.
Absolutely. I mean, look at this. I mean, this is a crazy example of how we got pulled in. And President Trump mentioned, the Gulf of Mexico was the Gulf of America, right? This was earlier this year that got pulled in. So believe it or not, Mall of America got pulled into that, and people were calling us the Mall of Mexico. Somebody went into Google the business listing and changed our brand to Mall of Mexico. Again, we didn't ask for this, but
and they weren't authorized to do that on your behalf.
It's crazy what can happen. And so, our team was working with Google to get that updated, but also there was all this social chatter and this conversation. Again, we didn't ask for it, but we had to carefully navigate what that looked like, and oftentimes just stayed quiet to let it just filter itself out. But things like that happen all the time. Also, having a governor that ran for vice president, as soon as that went national, being a Minnesota icon, naturally, we got pulled in the conversations. So as soon as people started talking about Governor Walz being from Minnesota, they pulled in other iconic brands. And so we got pulled into a lot of political conversations just because of the association with Minnesota. And again, had to navigate that. And, is that a place for us to actually comment on or be part of a conversation? No, it didn't benefit us from doing it, but we obviously monitored it and watched how that was going to take. But then that just dovetails into other conversations. And so you really have to watch how that spirals and monitor the content.
Yeah, because when those things happen, you didn't ask for it, but there's probably an expectation that you are going to comment or you are going to say something. What is your litmus test for when Mall of America will comment or not?
Well, what's interesting is we monitor our social very closely. We work with Sprout. Sprout is the platform that we use. So we're watching sentiment. We're watching number of posts, the authors of the posts. We're watching this daily. And so we have baselines that we're keeping an eye on. So it allows us to see if something really starts getting some steam and starts building momentum, or if it's something that we feel like will play itself out in 24, 48 hours and we don't need to touch it, or if it's something that really starts building momentum and we think it's going to be a bigger story that we really have to evaluate. So typically, we would be quiet. Over years and years of this, as a brand, we have decided that when things go negative or that are not associated with our brand and our values, we just stay quiet. Typically, that's worked for us. And then what happens is we drown it out with positive sentiment and content moving forward. And actually, a friend of ours, Jen Hellman, gave me a great analogy of this.
Crisis Squad member, Jen Hellman.
Yes, and we love Jen. And she gave me the analogy of absolutely, it's like popcorn. So when the popcorn gets burnt, it smells, and you have to deal with this burnt popcorn. But the only way to get rid of the burnt popcorn, aka the bad content, is pop fresh popcorn and drowned out that smell with fresh popcorn. I loved that because it resonated with me because I'm like, that's exactly what we do. And so when we've asked other communication experts, they align and say what you're doing is right for your brand. But we're in a world that continually changes. And I think all brands need to recognize that what has worked in the past doesn't necessarily work in the future. So we're reevaluating, because sometimes when you're quiet in today's age, that could also flag things and that you might need to step up and stand up for yourself. And so we're reevaluating that right now as a brand of, is being quiet all the time the right approach, or are there opportunities where we have evergreen content or posting during those times of crisis, even if we're not involved in it, but when there's a lot of fiery content in our community or in our nation, what is right? Because if we're pausing all the time, it doesn't give us a chance as a brand to celebrate what we do every single day. So we're reevaluating, and I encourage brands to take that time, take a step back, reevaluate it from a leadership perspective, and then share and have those conversations and have your social and communication teams involved.
Well, you have done that in such a good way for so long and have been a role model for many brands, not only in Minnesota where you're based, but all around the country and even the globe, because you're so on the national and the international playing fields with what you do. Well, I have to share something with you, a couple things I also want to ask you about. Right now in real time, as Jill and I talk, we are just days away. This will drop later, but as we talk, just a couple days ago, Charlie Kirk was assassinated. That is one of the biggest crises in our nation, in the United States, that we're dealing with right now. And yesterday I was on WJR in Detroit giving some analysis about it. Mm-hmm. And I'm a big lover of the Constitution. I was a poli-sci major in college. I love government. I love how it works. I love the Constitution. I call it the good book. Mm-hmm. And I mean that. And I'm not even being funny about it. And I have thought, as a crisis strategist, there's so many layers. And certainly if I'm asked by a media outlet to come and give analysis, I will. But I've thought about how does the Crisis Files react to this? Because our show, it's in the name. Crisis is in the name. But I've discerned right now, everybody is saying something or another. Trolls are saying things, good people are saying things, negative people are saying negative things, politicians are saying this and that. I have decided to wait. I have some things to say. I have some strong opinions, and really be smart, or I should say reasoned, discerning, and on brand for myself as a crisis strategist, but also the show. Because we have partners on this show, we have past guests on this show. Anything that this show does reflects anyone who's been a part of it or who will be a part of it. So these are some of the things that just in real time I'm thinking about for myself. For you, what's I've thought about, knowing you as a colleague and a partner in many ways and a friend, when we see violence toward top people, toward leaders of political parties, toward leaders of corporations, do you get concerned about your own personal and physical safety watching what we've seen over the past year?
Absolutely. I think all of us, process this information in different ways. And first, I applaud you on being able to step back and absorb what's happening around us, because I think a lot of us have an instinct to react emotionally to what's happening and wanting to put our feelings out there versus really listening and processing what's happening. So I think that is extremely smart from that perspective, because I think we all have our own opinions. We also represent brands, we represent our clients, we represent our partners. So when you talk about, from a leadership perspective, being uneasy and knowing that the world is changing, and we really all need to be more cautious of what we're doing. But I also don't want that to force us to live in a bubble either. It's important for us to continue to move forward and to be able to live our lives. And I work at a very highly visible, a global icon. So being part of an organization that I'm very proud of, I also recognize that there's difference of opinions out there in the world that we live in, and people don't always agree with decisions that are made or what companies do. But I represent not only the mall, but I also represent all of our tenants, all of our partners, and I'm very cautious of everything that I do, but also aware of the world around us and just making sure that, that we're prepared for what's, coming ahead, and making sure we have the right resources and the support that we need. But it's unfortunate that we have to live in this sense of not necessarily fear, but just the unknown of what's around the corner. And it makes you uneasy. But I think coming together as leaders and as organizations and as communities allows us to be powerful and more strong together moving forward.
And, one thing I thought about is you were talking about how closely you monitor and track what's going on your digital platforms, on social media. The vision I got in my head is your colleague who's responsible for all the buildings and the physical ops and the safety of people not coming in when the whole place is closed or doing bad things physically. It's kind of those two fronts. You've got to watch your actual physical building and buildings, as well as that online platform infrastructure at all times.
And what's interesting is Mall of America, people are watching us. We're always under a microscope of what we're doing, how we're doing things. And so we're very thoughtful of that. Even when you look back at COVID, there were a lot of organizations that were looking at us of what are they going to do? How are they going to protect their consumers? How are they going to follow the guidelines? And so we always are under that microscope. So whether it is on social channels and communication, or if it's the physical space and security, we're extremely proud of our security measures and the layers of security that we have, because we have such a unique property and millions of people that are coming through our doors every day.
It's amazing how many people are coming through.
It is 32 million people a year. So we are, at any given day, the third largest city in Minnesota. So we have to protect it as such. So having those layers and being very innovative in how we approach it is really important. And we share those best practices, because we recognize we can test and try so many different things within our property, whether it's through communication or through physical security measures, but we want to share those learnings with other businesses because we can only be better together.
What would be a couple big tips you can leave crisis filers with today when it comes to the physical safety as well as that digital safety?
think just always looking forward, never settling on what you have today, but making sure what you have is strong and you have a strategy that works well for your brand and for your physical space, but always looking forward, always looking for ways that you can improve, evaluating what you're doing to make sure that it's right in the moment in time, but also looking ahead, having conversations, listening, knowing that, other businesses are doing things, learn from them, working together. And I think that especially in the social space, like you're not going to be able to control the conversation. It's an organic platform and it's amazing by that, but it's also changing. And you need to know that you can only control what your brand is about and staying true to your values and what's important to how you communicate with your guests and recognizing how do you connect with your core customer, knowing that there's a lot of noise out there, but staying focused on that, supporting your team, training your team so that they have the right tools in place, but knowing that we're all learning together and we're going to try new things, but also just take a breath, and not feel like you have to move quickly, but to be true to your brand and just support your team.
And when it comes to social, you actually don't have to be everywhere at all times.
Correct.
I mean, I've personally decided not to join TikTok because it's just one more layer. Mm-hmm. It isn't really on brand for me, both my business as well as the show. Mm-hmm. And we try to be in other spaces that seem on brand for us and connect. And if it isn't working, we'll leave those places. But it's that constant assessment mm-hmm. and not being too entrenched in any one way.
Yeah, and I feel like so many brands feel like they have to say something with everything that's out there, and you don't have to. And I think for us at Mall of America, one of the things that's important is that we don't always lead with words. We would lead with actions. We have a building that can celebrate so many different people and communities and initiatives and celebrations that we do it with action versus words. And I think finding your right path of how you can make a difference is important because words are sometimes words. And a lot of times you see brands that will almost cut and paste what other brands do. Those that are early to the finish line, they'll just kind of cut and paste. And it feels very you lose that authenticity. So I think it's really important that you don't have to comment on everything and you don't have to be the first to post.
That is a really good advice. And on a very bright note, I want to take a moment to celebrate you. More than 28 years at Mall of America. Mm-hmm. You were just a baby when you started there and went all the way to the top. So congratulations on your tenure. What keeps you ticking, Jill?
The constant change, actually, the challenge, the opportunity to try new things, to work with different brands. I feel like the constant agility of our culture at Mall of America just makes it exciting. I started as an intern, so I wasn't a baby, but I was very young.
Close.
But it's been so fun to see the evolution of the retail industry, the entertainment industry, hospitality, and just how we've worked with different partners and how we want to keep it fresh and exciting so that when guests come to the mall, it's different every single time. And I think all brands can look at that in a way that fits them and their trajectory and their strategies moving forward. It's just what's new, what's next, and how do you keep it fresh and exciting for your customers each and every day.
Well, that is really well said. Lots of lessons in what she just said now, too. Thank you. And you can definitely get in touch with Jill and her team at mallofamerica.com. That's where you'll also find details about MOA events, entertainment, shopping, and my favorite, play. Today's case file is powered by Comcast. The Xfinity Network is Comcast's next-generation broadband network. It delivers better reliability, increased capacity, low latency, and multi-gig speeds, all to power the rapid rise in internet consumption today and in the future. Find out more about the Comcast connection at corporate.comcast.com. Rate, review, and subscribe to The Crisis Files on your platform of choice. Follow us on YouTube and Instagram at The Crisis Files. Visit thecrisisfiles.com for all 4 seasons of the show. I'm Roshini Rajkumar. Join me next time on The Crisis Files.